Hello again, everybody. My name is Mike Petralia. It's episode 233 of Patriots Beat on the CLNS Media Network. You can find us at our new website, www.clnsmedia.com. Follow us on Twitter at Patriots, CLNS, and at CLNS Media. You can also follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/CLNS Media. All right, it is my pleasure to welcome to the post-Super Bowl edition of Patriots Beat. The one and only Jim McBride does an outstanding job covering the Patriots for the Boston Globe. Jim, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Mike. I'm glad you had me.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that we don't have a lot to talk about after the Super Bowl, huh?
Yeah, I know. What a way to get into the off season. It's almost like it hasn't stopped at all for us. Always something with this team. Always news.
Literally always something with this team, and it's like you can't even take a deep breath. Certainly this franchise has been through this before, and you know that as well as anybody. Certainly going back to the end of Super Bowl 31 and Bill Parcells leaving and the way he left. This team has been through controversy and a lot of turbulence before, after Super Bowl losses, and this is just another example, but certainly I think it's fresh on everybody's mind. Let's get to the first point of contention that a lot of fans have with what happened in Super Bowl 52, and that is Malcolm Butler being benched. You and I were in the press box, and we were a couple of aisles separated, but when I saw Malcolm Butler not start the game, I wasn't shocked, but I was, my eyebrows were raised a little bit. Then I saw him doing jumping jacks and all these calisthenics on the sideline trying to keep himself warm. I'm like, well, he was sick, but he's clearly not sick. And then it became obvious Belichick didn't want to use him. Your read on how that whole story unfolded when you were watching the game live?
Yeah, very similar to your take. When he didn't start, I thought it might have had something to do with, his being sick and maybe missing some practice time or maybe even not even be able to participate in practice fully. And I thought, it might have been a situation where, hey, we're gonna hold him out for the first series, and of course, that went by, and then you're thinking, all right, maybe it's the first quarter. And then that went by, and then you're thinking maybe it's the first half, and that went by. And certainly we all thought, okay, I remember looking around at my colleagues and saying, okay, well, he comes out and starts the second half, right, after what happened in the first half. They had their struggles in the secondary and on defense in general. And when he didn't come out and start the second half, we just kind of looked at each other and he's definitely not playing in this game. And it was kind of strange. I was getting texts from family members and friends wanting to know the inside scoop. And, it's just said, look, if I had the inside scoop on this one, I'd be telling everybody. I'd be tweeting it out. But I just don't know why he's not in there. And, obviously, like you said, he was doing calisthenics, so there was nothing physically wrong with him. He played on, a punt team, one snap. Right. So, punt return. So he clearly was 100% healthy. So, it remains kind of a mystery as to why he didn't, other than, we know it wasn't disciplinary because that's what Coach Belichick said after the game. And, I have had sources who have confirmed that. So it's the $64,000 question of the Super Bowl for sure.
Well, and, when you take a look at the way the game unfolded, and there are people who have said that Bill Belichick can be one of the most stubborn people, for better and for worse, that there is in the game of football, and in certainly in the business of coaching. And he was going to make his point, whatever that point was going to be. Like, he didn't like the way Butler was approaching practice. He didn't like the way he looked, whatever it was. But when you saw early in the game how I thought I don't want to say disorganized, how mismatched they were in the secondary, it was obvious that when they had Eric Rowe start the game on Alshon Jeffrey, that was a bad mismatch. And and I can't imagine that they didn't think right away that that Stephon Gilmore wouldn't have been better just trailing Jeffrey all over the place if their initial intent was we're not going to have Malcolm play this game, right? I mean, it wasn't that your feel there?
Yeah, because even if Malcolm had started, I would have expected, Stephon to be on Alshon Jeffrey and just kind of, cover him all night. Obviously that's what happened in the second half, and he did a great job covering him. But
right,
it didn't make sense. They never looked comfortable on defense really throughout the whole game. I mean, Patrick Chung has played the slot plenty of times, but to ask him to play it the whole game was strange. So it really took them out of their comfort zone. If you wanted to, just match Gilmore up with Jeffrey and give Rowe whoever's on the opposite side, that would have made more sense to me. But they just never looked comfortable, and it really harkened back to those first 4 weeks of the season when people didn't. I like you said, I don't want to say confused, but they just didn't look comfortable in their roles, and people were kind of looking around at each other at the last second before the snap, like, am I where I'm supposed to be? Which was very uncharacteristic of this defense, say the last 11 games of the season when, they gave up their yards, but when push came to shove, they didn't give up many points.
Well, the other thing that I think people forget in this game is when you put Patrick Chung in the slot, you're not allowing him to cover, for the most part, Zach Ertz. And when I looked up a couple of times and saw Jordan Richards matched up against Zach Ertz, I'm like, what? How was that going to be in the Patriots' favor based on the rotations and the domino effect that Ben Volen, your colleague, broke down in film in this film review? How does that help the Patriots? And that's what, to me, Jim, doesn't make sense about this whatsoever. Because if we see that, Bill sees it.
Yeah, absolutely. The second half adjustments, some of them came, but certainly not enough of them came. And, Jordan Richards struggled mightily covering Zach Ertz. And as we know, and even in my scouting report for Sunday's paper for that game, I had one of my key matchups was Patrick Chung against Zach Ertz because,
right.
Patrick has excelled at covering tight ends and, faces Gronk an awful lot in practice. And if there's a defensive back in this league that can cover tight ends, it's Patrick Chung. Because he's so strong for his size and, he's got decent quickness. But when you ask him to start covering slot receivers for an entire game, you're kind of weakening him.
Yeah, and look, I mean, we all understand that Bill Belichick is the most accomplished coach in the Super Bowl era, certainly, and I would make the argument he's the most accomplished head coach in NFL history based on the free agency era and how he's built his rosters, how he's drafted, how he's developed players to fit a particular style and then have him excel in that style and then have his assistant coaches not only execute the game plan but also carry on that approach. And to me, none of this made sense on Sunday. It was like he, hate to say, outthink. He outsmarted himself, but it looks like he outsmarted himself.
Yeah, I would totally agree with your characterization of Bill as the greatest coach in NFL history. There's no question. But yeah, it almost looked like they had a plan in place and they were going to stick with it until it turned around, and it just never did. And that it was, like I said before, it was so reminiscent of those first four games where, people were trying to figure out their roles. And, I don't know when the game plan was completely implemented, but, it just didn't work. It just flat out didn't work. They only forced one punt the whole game, which was kind of ironic that the Patriots never punted and still lost the game. So, yeah, it was kind of a discombobulated situation on the field and for us in the press box, too, because we just didn't know what was going on.
Where does he wind up? I mean, obviously, the assumption is Malcolm Butler isn't coming back to New England. He's probably, going to sign somewhere else. And I'm just curious from you. I mean, people would certainly think New Orleans, because that almost happened last year, would be a logical landing spot. Detroit could happen because of Matt Patricia taking on the head job there, but that may or may not be a slam dunk. What do you think, Jim, early on here before we hit free agency?
those would definitely be my top two choices. I also think that Texans would be, that they need a corner, they need help on defense. That could be a possibility. But when we talked to Sean Payton at the owners' meetings, he really liked Malcolm and talked about him. They weren't able to reach out a deal, but he really liked them. So I think that gets revisited because the teams couldn't work out a trade. And he's from he's from Vicksburg, Mississippi, which isn't far from New Orleans. So it would kind of be like going home to him. But like you said, Detroit's an option because of his familiarity with Matty P. And I know that the Texans have had a need at cornerback, and Bill O'Brien has ties to the Patriots, so he knows, and he's seen Malcolm up close in 3 games the last 3 years in those joint practices, so he knows what he's getting. So I think those would be the 3 top teams that I would put.
And certainly Texans receiver DeAndre Hopkins, showing off his mad Photoshop skills on Tuesday, made a pitch for Malcolm Butler. I thought that was a pretty classy move. I thought that was pretty creative on DeAndre's part. No?
Yeah, absolutely. It would kind of be an iron sharpens iron kind of deal for him because he'd get to go against Malcolm in practice, and DeAndre's probably in the top. Maybe only Antonio Brown is better than him in the league, in my opinion. So, if he wants Malcolm Butler, then he has a tremendous amount of respect for him.
Speaking with the terrific Jim McBride, Patriots beat reporter for the Boston Globe, have to tell you guys about my newest time-saving trick. I got my contact lens prescription for my daughter Janie renewed for my couch just 2 weeks ago, and I did it in under 5 minutes using an awesome new app called Simple Contacts. Simple Contacts lets you renew your prescription and reorder your brand of lenses from anywhere in minutes through an online vision test, or if you have an existing prescription. It's designed by doctors, and every test is reviewed by a doctor, so they're literally bringing the doctor's office right to your home. The contact lens prices are unbeatable. The vision test is only $20, and shipping is free. Best of all, my listeners get $30 off their first Simple Contacts order with my promo code TRAGS. This is not a replacement for an eye exam, and they want you to know that. But again, try it for yourself and save $30 on your lenses by going to simplecontacts.com using the /code TRAGS, or just enter the code TRAGS at checkout. Again, that's simplecontacts.com/TRAGS, or just enter the code TRAGS, TRAGS, at checkout. Again, speaking with Jim McBride of the Boston Globe, covering the New England Patriots for the Boston Globe, and I want to move on to some other subjects because, oh, by the way, the Patriots are getting back their offensive coordinator after we thought for the last 3 weeks or so Josh McDaniels was all but gone for Indianapolis. Your level of surprise or shock when you heard or saw the first tweet from Adam Schefter that Josh McDaniels was turning down the Colts on Tuesday night, Jim?
Pretty jaw-dropping, Trags. I stepped off the plane yesterday from Minneapolis and immediately wrote a story about Josh taking the job because the Colts had made the announcement. I thought that there was. It was strange that he didn't want to talk about that after the Super Bowl.
I did too.
But then I thought, it's right. It's right after the emotion of the game. Maybe that's the reason why. So there was maybe a seed of doubt in my head at that point. But then when I saw the tweet from the Colts on Tuesday, I said, okay, well, that was crazy of me to think that. And then about later on in the afternoon, I thought, I was crazy to think that I was crazy because. Lo and behold, Josh was coming back, and, I had to write a whole new story. So probably, the range of emotions that we went through were probably not quite as what he went through, but still a pretty big surprise that he's still going to be the offensive coordinator of the Patriots after it looked like it was locked in to be the next Colts coach.
As I always tell my daughter Janie when she's taking an exam, always trust your first instinct, Jim. Always go with your gut. That's all I can tell you about that instinct.
I would have looked like a genius on this one had I done that.
Yeah, I'm sure you would have, and I know as much as anybody that you are very, very, very good at your job, and I would have taken your word, and I would have taken your judgment on that. And I was in that staging area, they like to call it, after the Super Bowl, where they bring all of the star players and the coaches in there. And he just didn't look, when the question was asked, he almost had a faraway, disengaged reaction to the question, which is, like you said, he's trying to just talk about the game that just ended, and he doesn't want this to come across as selfish or what have you. That great, I'm moving on to my second head coaching job. It wasn't that. It just looked like he was a little bit disengaged. Now, you saw the Chris Ballard news conference today, Jim. What did you think?
Yes. I think that he was probably not only shocked but probably a little hurt, because I'm sure he thought he had his guy in place. And one other thing before I address that, it's funny, people had asked me about Josh's reaction on Sunday night, and then they said, well, what was Matt Patricia like when they asked him if he was definitely taking the Detroit job? And I don't think anyone even asked him, because he was so peppered with Malcolm questions that by the time he had left, no one had really asked him about, hey, you definitely taking the Lions job. So it was kind of, I didn't have a point of reference to compare his reaction to Josh's. But,
right.
Yeah, it was the Ballard press conference today, I thought was, clearly they were hurt. The fact that he didn't want to hear Josh's reason for doing it. He just wanted yes or no. He didn't, so clearly they were hurt and they wanted to move on quickly. I found it interesting, the mic drop moment at the end there when he said, the rivalry is back on. That was kind of funny, and that's going to make for a great week when the Colts come to Foxborough next year. I mean, that's going to be brought up again, and Josh is going to face questions about it, and maybe he reveals more of his answers, because I don't know that we'll get any anytime soon about exactly what range of emotions he went through to change his mind.
He really is not going to have to talk, I don't think, until perhaps the mini camp, if the team is forced to make them, the assistants available then, or perhaps in training camp. So it's going to be a while before we hear from Josh McDaniels, at least in front of all of us as a group of reporters. But, before we, talk specifically about Chris Ballard, let's go back 24 hours and acknowledge the meeting, the 12 to 14 hours worth of meetings between Josh McDaniels, Robert Kraft, and Bill Belichick, and your gist and your understanding of what that meeting was all about.
Yeah, I think it was, I think that there was obviously mutual interest in getting this done. I think that, Mr. Kraft probably went to Josh, and it might have been even, hey, this was, a goodbye thing. And, maybe he sensed the fact that Josh wasn't all in on the Colts and decided to have a conversation about it, sweeten the pot maybe. I know my sources tell me that Josh wasn't given any assurances that, he's the heir apparent when Bill decides to leave. But I'm sure he was given some kind of, encouragement that, you'll be near the top of the list for consideration, especially if the successful run that the offense has been on for these last, 10 years continues. Then I think that, he'll be given every consideration in the world. But, things happen. And I think that, the familial ties that he has in this area were important to him. And I don't think it was a great experience he had in Denver, and then he was in St. Louis for a year. And I just don't think he wanted to uproot his family unless he felt like he was all in on something. And, clearly now he wasn't.
Well, and the other thing, Jim, that I've told other people that I very much believe this, don't discount the Tom Brady factor in all of this, because who is Josh McDaniels' closest confidant on the team? It's Tom, right? And, we've seen
Absolutely.
it. And Tom versus time, the two of them talking on their way to the Carolina game, I believe it was, in week 4, and going over plays. And I just feel, I get the sense, as close as Tom and Robert Kraft are, that Tom got into Robert Kraft's ear, and I don't know this to be the case, but I certainly think it would make sense, and said, hey, can we make one last ditch effort at bringing Josh back, because I only have so many more years, and instead of making a transition at the age of 41 to a new offensive coordinator, even if that offensive coordinator's Chad O'Shea, I would rather just stick with Josh.
Yeah, I certainly think that's a plausible, scenario, Trags. Absolutely. Tom and Josh, despite what everyone wants to, make a big deal about their heated exchange in Buffalo,
Yeah.
they're close. They've each said that they love each other like a brother, and I think that's the kind of relationship they have. They're gonna have arguments and disagreements because they both want the same thing, basically perfection. But yeah, the relationship is very, very close. I think I think that they're not just, coach quarterback. They're friends. They're, not far apart in age at all. So I just think they're very close, and I think that's a very possible situation that he went to Mr. Kraft and said, look, I don't want to lose Josh, and if there's any possible way that we can keep him, let's do it.
I just think that makes too much sense for that not to have played a factor. Okay, Bill Belichick meeting with Robert Kraft and Tom Brady. A, does that happen? And B, if it does, what is the end result?
If it happened already, or if it's
no,
going to
do
happen?
you think it's going to happen? As has been reported, as has been suggested, that the three are going to. I believe Ian Rappaport was the latest to say that something is going to happen between the three of them to get together. If they indeed sit down as a group, what do you think is the result?
I think that it's probably more standard operating procedure than anything that the three of them would get together in the off season, and maybe they're doing it this time because of all the Alex Guerrero stories and the Seth Wickersham report, and maybe they want to clear the air, but I really don't think that the problems are as dire as everyone says, or that even that Seth story made it out to be. I think it was the fact that there's, three guys that, don't always see eye to eye, but they work together just like any other company or workplace. But that doesn't necessarily mean you can't get the job done, so maybe it's just one of those clear the air type meetings. And they address, points that were brought up in that story, but I don't think it's odd or strange that they're getting together, and having a meeting. I think that they probably do that, on a pretty consistent basis, especially in the off season when they have the time.
I would agree with that, Jim. The only thing I would say, though, is if it's true that Robert Kraft did not have any idea of what Belichick was doing, and didn't get any explanation beyond it was just my coach's decision on Malcolm Butler, I would tend to think that it adds another element of intrigue if those three get together, don't you think?
Yeah, I think so. If that is the case, then maybe it's just Kraft wanting to say, hey, what went into the decision? Was it X, Y, or Z? And certainly as an owner, he has every right to do that. I don't think his trust level in Bill would waver at all, or his confidence in him, but maybe he just wants to know what went into that decision.
Okay, how much of an impact will Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson and Sly Stallone have on the future of the Patriots offense?
Well, I hope none from a selfish perspective, because it's fun to cover Rob Gronkowski, and he's a fun guy to be around, and he's a fun guy to watch. It's like watching, we could be watching the best player in the history of football at that position. We already get to do it with Tom, but I think Gronkowski is kind of a different animal at that tight end position, like we've never seen before. And I would hate to see his career end for for a chance at Hollywood. I mean, I've seen some of his acting, and he needs some work there.
Yeah, he does. There's no question about that. But there's acting, and then there's charisma, and Hollywood can sell charisma just as well as it can sell acting. My whole thing here, Jim, is twofold. I think it is health related. I think the last concussion started him thinking seriously about his future. He's had the 3 back surgeries. He's had the forearm. He's had obviously the knee injury, the ACL, and I just think he's wondering what kind of quality of life is he going to have, not when he's 40, when he's 30, 35. And I think that is crossing his mind, and I think he is. I don't think this is a passing, fancy of, hey, I'm just going to mess around with you guys and say I'm going to look at retiring. The other thing is, I do think he wants to be paid. If he's coming back, I think he wants to receive what he thinks is fair and just for what he's contributed and the way he's sacrificed his body.
Yeah, I think that's the latter is probably the more logical scenario, that his contract gets restructured or torn up and they have a whole new contract for him. Clearly he deserves it, and that's definitely on his mind. He has had a lot of wear and tear. I think the retirement comments were laid out there, but he was also it was in the heat of the moment, the emotional aftermath of losing that Super Bowl. But I have to believe that he still wants to play, and that I think that an acting career can be there even after a couple more years. And so I think he still has a couple more years in him. I think he'd like to play at least as long as Tom's still playing, and then maybe get out of Dodge.
That I like that theory as much as any other, Jim. I think obviously the story got legs when Mike Florio during the Super Bowl threw out that tweet. And I think it got everybody kind of going, really? Where's that? Well, and then obviously Florio and the relationship with Drew Rosenhaus, who is Gronk's agent. I mean, everybody puts, one and one together and comes up with three and connect the dots and all of that. And that's probably where a lot of that came from.
Yeah, I think so too. He does get a lot of, they do have a good relationship, and, Florio's a pretty reliable source. So, when you see that out there, you have to take it seriously.
All right. What's your time going to be? Are you going to be able to catch your breath now that you've written about Josh McDaniels, Matt Patricia, Bill Belichick, Malcolm Butler, Rob Gronkowski? Are you going to be able to get yourself any type of break here coming up?
I hope so. I did a story today about the pending free agents, the top priorities. The Patriots have 15 free agents, and what might happen with them, but might do like a future roster breakdown. But then I'm going to take some time off and kind of dig into the draft right before the combine. But yeah, definitely won't be making that trip down Route 1 anytime soon. So that's good.
Well, if anybody's deserved some time off, it is you, Jim McBride. Follow you on Twitter. How can people do it?
At Globe Jim McBride, and I appreciate those comments from the man I consider the hardest working guy in this Boston market, and you.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Jim. You didn't have to say that, but that is very kind of you. And obviously, people can follow you at Boston Globe, at thebostonglobe.com, correct?
Absolutely. Yep, I'll be there.
All right, stay with CLNS all day on game days starting in 2018 with the CLNS Media New England Patriots pregame show. That's with Alex Barth, and that's a half hour before every game. Then you can catch the postgame show, as was the case in 2017, with Marvin Ezon and Mike Molyneux live after every single game on clnsmedia.com. Subscribe to both on iTunes and Stitcher and YouTube now. You can also go back and listen to old episodes. Also get daily team updates on the Patriots Newsfeed podcast with Tyler Trudeau, which is also available on the CLNS Media New England Patriots postgame show feed. Available once again on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, and the CLNS Media mobile app. Thanks again for downloading today's Patriots Beat. Want to once again thank our terrific guest, Jim McBride from the Boston Globe. You can follow him again on Twitter at Globe Jim McBride. You can also give us a follow at Patriots_Beat, at Patriots CLNS, and at CLNS Media. You can also give my own personal account a follow at Trags, Trags. Today's sponsor with Simple Contacts. For Patriots Content Manager Michael Angi, CLNS Media Executive Producer Larry H. Russell, the founder of the network Nick Gelso, thanks to everyone who tuned in. This is Mike Petralia, and this is the Patriots Beat podcast, powered by CLNS Media.
What's going on, Past Nation? This is Marvin Zahn of the CLNS Media Network, and I'm here to tell you right now to check out the CLNS Media New England Patriots postgame show hosted by myself and my co-host, Mr. Mike Nice. And live on CLNS Radio immediately after every single Pats game. Call in at 929-477-2386 toll free to get your voice heard and contribute to the host breakdown and analysis of the latest Patriots contest. We also got the stars and sorries of the day, Twitter posts for the plays of the game, and everything else that is going on with the 5-time Super Bowl champions. Subscribe to CLNS Media New England Patriots postgame show on iTunes and Stitcher, and the best way, download the free CLNS Media Network mobile app for on-demand listening anytime, any place, anywhere.